My name is Sal Glesser. We started making knife sharpeners back in 1978. We started making knives in 1981, and we've been making both ever since. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, not the best part of Brooklyn, New York. And so I learned that if I sharpened a 16-penny nail on the sidewalk, it would fit in my hand with about that much of it sticking out. And sometimes you had to be really aggressive if you wanted to keep your lunch money on the way to school. So that was my first involvement with knives. Although even as a little kid, the attraction was there. Then we left the New York area and moved to California, to the Los Angeles area, the Crenshaw district. I was there until I left home about 17. And then I bounced up and down the California state until I finally left California with my wife Gail in 1975. And we went on the road for about 5 years. I met my wife in Redding, California. That's the last place that I lived in California. We were introduced to each other by a mutual friend, and we got along real well. She's a little wacko like I am, and so we had something mutual. And then we left Redding, California in '75. We were living in a bread delivery truck that we converted into a motorhome, and we towed a Volkswagen behind the truck that had our factory in it. We had drill presses and welding tanks, and we used to manufacture our product in campgrounds, various parts of the country, and then sell our products in the county fairs, state fairs. We started manufacturing a product called the portable hand in 1976, and then we started manufacturing our knife sharpener, the original version, in 1978. We introduced it at the Texas State Fair in October of '78. And then the sharpener started to get more and more popular, so we dropped the portable hand. And there's a few out there, but not very many. And then we continued to make and improve the sharpener until 1980, when we invented a new kind of pocket knife.
Well, the first Spyderco came from an idea that my father started to work with. He wanted to make a knife that was easier to open with one hand, and he's given a little history about that. But what he used to do is he used to use his thumb pad on knives in the past so that he could get some leverage to try to open up some knives with one hand, and that took practice. And so he wanted to make a product that was similar to that concept, but a little easier for the consumer to use. And so he took a knife one day and he welded some material on top of it so that it had a larger purchase area. This is the knife that he began to work with. So this was where the first original idea came from. In here you'll see how there's little zigzags of metal. That's where he took another product of ours, which is called the portable hand, and he took that apart and then he welded some of those materials on top of this blade so that he could create a larger area for your thumb to land on, and he ground out a little area here so that your thumb had an area to get to. And with this concept, he started by using little thumb discs and thumb studs, and started adding things to the blade so that your thumb could be able to grab something. Then he started working with a little divot that your thumb could begin to grab. And then at some point, he figured out that he just wanted to use a round hole. So at the time, he took a hand drill and he drilled through this blade as just kind of a first representation of, is this concept going to work? So that you could open it with one hand. So this was the second prototype that we made, and this was more of a representation of the design that he wanted to work with. This comes up with a mid-back lock, which at the time was an evolving new feature for knives. But then it has that round hole so that you could get into it. It's stiff over the years, and open it with one hand. This is the original design of the worker. If you look at the modern worker that we did come out with, it has different shape to it, but you can still see the original concept on the second prototype. And then it's been in this wooden box ever since.
That was the first knife that we made. So when Eric was born in 1980, we were already starting that first knife, and it came out in 1981. And then he kind of grew up in the business, so he was involved with knives from the time he was a baby. We were a smaller company then. We only had a few employees, and so he had a playpen in my office. So we used to bring him to work with us and change his diapers between phone calls. And so he was kind of watching all this going on.
Some of my first memories of Spyderco were two things. One, my parents used to have a big box or a playpen in the shop, and they'd fill it with popcorn because that's what we packaged stuff with. And I used to play in the popcorn, peeking my head over the box. That was one of my earliest memories. I used to do that on a daily basis. My dad used to be a pitchman, so he was up on the box quite often with a microphone, and my mother was to his side selling some of the other product. And quite often I would be underneath the table where nobody could see me, and I'd be playing underneath the pitch table. And so the words were always there. My mother was always on the left with the knives or other product. And so some of my earliest memories are playing in the shop when we weren't on the road. As time went on, the buildings moved. We've probably moved, I'm guessing, a dozen times. Always stayed in the town of Golden. But they went from a bread truck to a small room, to a bigger room, to a multi-room. And nowadays, we're on the other end of Golden with a big building. But there's been a lot of memories all in between. With our product, very importantly, is the engineering these days. With the machines and the capabilities of the locks, the expectations of the customer, the engineering of where our knives have come, particularly in the last 10 years, has really progressed rapidly. Most of our engineering done these days is done like this. In 3D, you can get a much better grasp of the parts themselves. They can do better transitions from the engineers into the manufacturing facility. But where we've come in engineering over the last 10 and 15 years has gone to much of what was a 2D process that used much less sophisticated equipment, and we've come a long way since then.
And then while I would be designing knives mostly on my desk or the kitchen table, he would kind of be watching. You know, why did you do that? What is this for? That looks funny. Why did you do that? And I guess he started drawing knives when he was about 8. And we had a little shop out in the garage, and he would go out there on the grinders and grind them out of wood. We'd slow down the grinders so that he could get used to doing it. And then over the years, he just learned how to do more and more.
Growing up, there were always knives around. I can remember I was in probably 2nd or 3rd grade, and the principal called my parents because I was trading knives for Hot Wheels. And so, you know, growing up, knives have always been part of my life. Okay, this is where a lot of our processes start when we're making the knives. This is the staging process that we put the steels that are about to go into process. Now, in our factory for blade steels, we use nothing that's less than 0.9% carbon. Most of our steels are also powdered metals. A lot of steels are more expensive that we use, and they take a lot more specializing process to be able to achieve what we're trying to achieve with them. To give you a real quick estimation, a lot of these steels can range from $15 to maybe $35 per pound, and they're very sophisticated in the way that they were made and formed, where you can sometimes buy an inexpensive knife that costs $15 or less. And so for a Spyderco, we're using some of the top materials on everything we're using, particularly out of this U.S. facility, and it starts here.
We thought about names quite a bit. I was a car junkie, you know, mostly European sports cars and Formula One cars. And one of the things that I realized was that when most of the car companies built their high-performance version, they called it a Spyder. Porsche made a Spyder, Ferrari made a Spyder, Maserati made a Spyder, and that was the general term that was applied to a fast, high-performance vehicle. And we were planning on making high-performance products, so we we decided that Spyderco would be a good name. The most important part about a company name is that you remember it. And we felt that that was more memorable. And at the time, there wasn't anybody using anything like it. Now there's quite a few Spyders out there, but back then, we started using the name in January of 1976, and we put it on all the products that we made.
Growing up in the knife industry for me was fun. I wasn't quite aware of what we were doing and the entire industry as a kid growing up. The first knives I knew about were our knives. They were clip carry, one hand open, stainless steel, high quality knives. And so for me it was very normal to have a clip carry, one hand open knife with serrations. It wasn't until I was a little older that I started to realize that that was kind of considered a new fashion knife, that the entire industry wasn't doing that.
So we decided that we wanted to create a company that built high performance products that used industrial standards rather than consumer standards. We felt that there was a market. It was probably a smaller market for that higher quality and that higher performance. But over the years we learned that it's a smaller market, but it's a loyal market, and those people generally want to get more involved in the product. And we've always leaned in that direction to create products that performed well rather than looked pretty.
Mostly what we focus on here in the U.S. facility is the fabrication of the blade. We do all the other components as well, or most of all the other components, but the blade is particularly more difficult than a lot of the components because of the types of materials we're making and the types of shapes we're trying to achieve. One of the things that makes it difficult for us to make a blade is that we have to laser cut our parts. The materials that we're using are so hard that the stampers aren't really made to be able to stamp out like a cookie cutter the types of shapes we're trying to achieve. As a quick example, some of the things that we're doing with our blades is we have a little fine grip here called chimping so that the thumb can rest nicely on it. We have a round hole that's cut out. We have a pivot hole. We have some lock areas. And so some of these tolerances we'd like to be tight, and we're using a very obstinate material to begin with, so laser cutting is important. One of the things that we try to achieve here is a good laser cut. But we think that if we can start with a very premium blade, blank, before we've begun, it makes everything a little easier. So that's one reason why we want a very nice part to begin with, so that all the other parts down the line work well with that. The other thing that we try to achieve is capability in the quality. If you're able to achieve a higher quality and able to do more with your parts to begin with, it opens up the playbook, if you will, of what you're able to do. So if you were to have, a quarterback that could throw 30 yards versus a quarterback that can throw 90 yards, you can have much more diversity in what you're doing and a larger playbook. And so what we're able to do is we start with the best materials to begin with, and then right from the laser cut, we should be already ahead in our game.
Eric wasn't quite a year old, and he would sometimes not want to go to bed like kids do. And Gail and I were involved with butterfly knives. We were distributing Balisongs made by what is now Benchmade Knife Company. We were one of their distributors. And so we always had butterfly knives around. And so we would play with the butterfly knives, mostly just moving them around. And he just, for some reason, liked the flashing of the blades, and he would go to sleep. That was probably the last thing you saw before he fell asleep, many times. Now he's pretty good with a butterfly knife. We make a product called a Balio, which is a pen that has a lot of the features of a butterfly knife, but it's safe, and you can use it anywhere, and it's not against the law. And we still make that product today, and Eric developed that product.